Nessa's Oblation is the best slug shotgun in the entire game now, and in this video, I'm going to tell you the 6 reasons why it is the best. But first, why are slugs even good in the first place? Slug swapping has been and is still one of the best options for DPS in the entire game, allowing any combination of classes to easily hit one phases, and offers potentially the best damage setup for moving bosses, allowing you to deal considerable damage without even using a heavy weapon, making this great for speedruns and low mans or just general raiding. Of all the slug shotguns we currently have access to, the ones that are good are as follows. Heritage has decent perks and is super easy to craft a 5 out of 5 roll for. Fortissimo has extremely good damage perks with lots of variety and even has 4 times the charm in the third column. First in last out has the OG Godroll of autoloading and Vorpal, and even something like Sojourner's Tale is useful when surrounded can be procced for a massive 40% damage increase. That said, when it comes down to the best option in the energy slots, Nessa's Obligation can be officially crowned as the best slug shotgun we have access to. As I mentioned in a second here, we are going to be covering 6 extremely important reasons that Nessa's Oblation is more meta than any other slug like Philo and Heritage, and then towards the end of the video, I'm going to be going over 2 extremely good Godrolls that you guys should be aiming to get. Starting off with reason number 1 as to why Nessa's Oblation is the best slug shotgun in the game, specifically in the energy slot, is because it's fully craftable, making it the only energy slug shotgun we have access to that is craftable. This means you literally have a 100% chance to get access to a 5 out of 5 god roll, and in the case of a 5 out of 5 roll, for slug shotguns, this is extremely important for hitting double slug rotations and optimal DPS. Going handling for max weapon swap speed is obviously going to be super important, but if you already have high handling as is, opting for range is going to be a better option instead. Something like full bore or even hammerforged rifling is going to give you anywhere from plus 15 to plus 10 range, and then something like assault mag, which increases the RPM of the weapon from 65 up to 70, is going to be a make or break perk for the weapon. This means for anybody that doesn't have a 5 out of 5 Philo or a 5 out of 5 Gnora's Axe can go and craft Nessas and have a perfect roll today. For reason number 2, on Nessas, Reconstruction also rolls as a perk. This slowly reloads weapons over time up to double the base magazine size, which is useful for dealing DPS because there is way less downtime reloading, and in double slug rotations you have extra time to have ammo reconstruct into the magazine as you're dealing damage. Philo is currently used because it has autoloading holster, which is great, and as you're going to see here in the double slugging rotation, both Philo with autoloading and Nessas with reconstruction allow us to get off 24 shots. But since we don't need to wait for Nessas to autoload, this gives us a slight increase in DPS since we're dealing the same damage in a shorter duration. The third reason I think Nessas is the most meta option for slug shotguns is because it has access to the perk Frenzy. Obviously, this is going to be the exact same damage buff, which is 15%, as something like Vorpal weapon, so nothing crazy here. However, we also get the added benefits of increased handling and reload speed. As far as I'm aware, this used to give plus 50 to each stat, and it now just gives plus 100, meaning that it maxes both stats out, even if you have a 0 stat roll at base. For any slug that doesn't have at least 65 or 75 handling, you're going to need Frenzy to max out your reload speed unless you're using something like Ophidian aspects. Even in the case of Ophidians and other handling / weapon swap speed exotics, this doesn't always max out your handling depending on the stat that each exotic provides. I think Ophidians give like plus 25 or plus 30. Which means in a lot of cases, you're going to be able to rely on just Frenzy to max out your handling instead of any other exotic, freeing up your builds. After your handling is maxed out for any weapon or weapons that you are running, the only other way to increase your weapon swap speed is with something like Void Dexterity, which offers an animation scalar decrease. This is reason number 4 as to why Nessas is more meta than a lot of other options, because it is Void, and the other weapon that is Void that is commonly used in slug swapping rotations is Tractor Cannon. This means I can use something like double Void Dexterity on my gauntlets, and then also throw on something like Kinetic Dexterity to max out my handling and further increase it for my Void weapons, while still offering good weapon swap speed with something like Heritage. If I wanted to say on something like first in, last out, then I would just have to swap up my dexterities, but I wouldn't be getting double Void Dexterity to increase something like Tractor Cannon, which has a notoriously low handling speed. This is definitely one of the more minor benefits, but I do think it does play an effect and will have an effect on your DPS rotations against certain bosses or many bosses that you choose to run slugs with. Reason number 5 that Nessa's is a better slug shotgun to run than a lot of other options is because we can get adept versions for it. I don't have an adept Nessa's to show this off with, but I do have Acacia's Dejection, which works just fine and is another adept weapon from the exact same raid. With adept weapons, we get access to adept mods. Here we have an adept range mod, which gives plus 10 to the range stat, or we could also opt for something like plus 10 handling as well. I would always recommend just going for a regular crafted roll over an adept weapon roll, because a 5 out of 5 that you can craft is going to be better than a 4 out of 5, even if it is adept. But if you do happen to get a 5 out of 5 adept weapon, you might as well use it. Boss spec, which is a 7.77% increase in your damage against bosses only, is obviously going to be one of the best options to run no matter what. But that being said, if you are double slug swapping and a boss is moving, or you're at an extremely far range and you don't have option to something like Lunafaction boots, then in that case, the plus 10 range might help with damage fall off. And then finally, reason number 6 as to why Nessa's is just better than every other slug shotgun, especially in the energy slot. Comparing this to something like first in, last out, which has historically been the best other option, Nessa's is just way better in every single stat. As you see here, as I toggle between the two stats, we get a grand total of 49 extra stat points that are added to Nessa's compared to first in, last out. Namely, we're getting plus 5 extra range, which helps a ton, and plus 9 handling, which helps with weapon swap speeds too. I think for those 6 reasons, it's pretty easy to see why Nessa's is the best slug shotgun that you can be going for these days, and it's super easy to acquire. So with that said, let's go over 2 rolls that you should be crafting, of which you can pick whichever one fits your play style best. I don't have this craftable yet myself. I think I showed off I have 4 out of the 5 patterns, so I'll craft this as soon as I'm able to. But first off, for both rolls, we are going to be running Reconstruction, so you're always going to want that on no matter what. And then obviously you'll also always want on Assault Mag for that higher RPM. After that, the very first roll we're going to be speccing into is going to be with Vorpal Weapon. This obviously just gives us a flat 15% increase in our damage to bosses. And the reason that we're doing this roll slightly different than a Frenzy roll is because Vorpal Weapon is much easier to use than Frenzy, because you don't have to make sure you're in combat to get that damage increase. That being said, we aren't obviously going to get any major benefits to our handling, so we just want to make sure we're not decreasing our handling, because 69 is more than enough at base. For that reason, we're just going to go with Hammer Forged Rifling, which is plus 10 range and has no negative benefits. And then with that, we're going plus 10 range through a range masterwork. In total, we have 83 range, which is fantastic, and we still have 69 handling, which is super solid as well. On Warlocks, Ophidian Aspects are going to give us plus 35 handling, so as long as we have 65 on our base weapon rolls, that is more than enough to use this on locks to weapon swap. If you're swapping on Hunter, you can also just use Dragon Shadow, so that after dodging, you get plus 100 to your weapon swap speed for I think 10 to 13 seconds, by which time you can probably dodge again. And you also always have the option to be running Solar, where you can just use on your mark, a dodge, and get handling that way. For the second roll we have, we're just going to be swapping Vorpal Weapon out for something like Frenzy, where we get that plus 100 handling to max our handling stat out. And for that reason, we can go full bore, because even though we do lose 5 handling when Frenzy's procced, it's going to max it out anyways, and we get a bit extra range here. If you are a Titan main and you're only playing Titan doing double slug swapping, even though it's probably not as recommended as other classes, this will be the role that you want to go with so that you get that max handling and you don't need any exotics to help you with that. Lastly, I will mention that something like Paracausal Affinity is a 20% damage increase and could technically be better for shorter damage phases or phases where you do have an abundance of adds, but you have to factor in the fact that you're using a shot or an ability to proc Paracausal Affinity, and if it is an ability, you need to match your subclass with Void, so you'll need to be on a Void subclass and get like a grenade or melee kill. Plus, this only lasts 6 seconds, and if you do go the route of shooting an ad with the shotgun, then you're wasting ammo in your damage rotation. I think Paracausal Affinity sounds great on paper because it's a 5% higher damage buff, but it's way harder to use consistently, and I don't think 5% is really worth it. That is it for this video, guys. Let me know your thoughts on Nessa's Oblation in the comments down below, and whether or not you agree with all the reasons that I think this weapon is better than other slug shotguns. Also, let me know how often you guys find yourself double slug swapping for damage versus triple shotgun swapping when somebody's using tractor cannon. I feel like I use it a lot more often now that div got nerfed down to 15%, so that I can constantly apply a 30% debuff, especially to moving bosses. I do also stream a bunch over on my Twitch, where we're working on Root of Nightmare speedruns right now. A link to my Twitch and my Discord server will both be in the description below. Anyways, that's it for this video. As always, have a good one, guys. Peace.